How are you both?
She's pretty quiet.
Commissioner Bondima, you're muted. You may need to go out and come back.
Oh, I was trying to print something and I couldn't get to my speaker to unmute me, and my printer wasn't printed. I was trying to print the agenda, and for some reason, it's not printing, and I don't know why.
I just got a message from Mr. Gant that he's running a little behind, but for the sake of honoring everyone's time, I want to get started because we have a very full agenda. So thank you everyone for attending the December 21st, 2021, the last committee meeting of 2021, in fact. To today's presenters, I respectfully ask that you stick to your allotted presentation time, and to my distinguished colleagues, I ask that you save any questions or comments unless they're super pressing until the end of each presentation. So with that, let's get started with the budget update. Good morning, Courtney.
Good morning, everyone. Let me pull it up. All right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to present this month's budget update. We have a couple items to discuss, and I will definitely stick to the timeline. All right, so 4 things. So updates on the FY23 process. We spoke a little bit about the fact that we're getting started in the FY23 process and implications of that once we wrapped up enrollment adjustments. A discussion on some of the district priority engagement dates, and then the start of the enrollment projection process, and an update on the Kerwin internal work group. So with regards to the FY23 process, and we'll fix the view. Yeah, so there's 3 focus areas that we're looking towards for this process. So the first is increased communication. So this is based on some of the feedback that we've received already last year. We want to have more and earlier board engagement. We thought that served us well last year with regards to talking through the elements of the budget, and this year that's even more important with regards to Kerwin. So we're trying to put another meeting, a presentation, I should say, on the calendar for the public meeting, as was recommended in the last Ops Committee. So we're looking towards the January 25th date to have a larger scale Kerwin presentation to the board and community. Also, we increased the review time for the budget. If you recall, last year there were 2 weeks between when the budget was initially presented and when the board had to vote on it. So this year we scheduled in a 4-week period to allow more time for community feedback and board review before the budget has to be voted on. The second area is increased accountability. We're running a bit of a pilot this year in terms of how we do some of the central office budgeting. And we're looking to a 2-year budgeting process. It's something we want to test out with central office, and depending on how it works, and we're going to tweak it a bit, we want to be able to, in the near future, sort of take this process to the schools. Part of this is the concept of, sort of not rebuilding the ship every single year. There are a lot of priorities or funding initiatives that need to be given more than 1 year for us to see results. And there are a lot of elements of the budget that are rather, I won't say pedantic, but there are elements that you're going to do every year anyway. So kind of like going back to the drawing board every year and starting from scratch isn't as efficient as some other budget methods that we've been researching and looking towards. So we want to start testing that out with Cabinet this year with some of the central office budgeting priorities, and we're looking at a 2-year cycle for those. Some of our funding streams now, particularly with like ESSER and ARP funding, sort of facilitate that a bit, so it makes it a little bit easier. The other element of that is having better tie-in or greater tie-in between the elements that are presented as budget priorities and the initiatives that are taking place in the district. So we spoke about this at our last Ops Committee presentation, and that's starting to take shape a little more. So this year you're going to see the priorities tie in more closely with the R3 and blueprint elements instead of being more independent as they had been previously. So the things are a lot more cohesive and they follow the same streamline or same path for development. The third area, and we started this already in this current year with the enrollment adjustment changes, It's looking for ways to sort of like streamline the process for how schools and principals experience the budgeting process. Looking at elements that we've carried over from year to year that maybe don't need to be done the way that they have been done previously, or the need for those elements or processes have changed and we can do them differently, and hopefully with less of a burden on schools. So we're looking at some of the processes or steps, for example, some of the meetings that principals have to engage in, or some of the documentation that they have to provide, looking to understand whether the requirements are still the same, whether there's an easier way to do it. And we're also looking at some of that internally with our budgeting process for central office staff and folks, how we go about the process, what's needed in terms of background and research and requirement, what's needed in terms of submissions, so they can go through the process. So we're looking at areas and ways that we can sort of make things easier for those involved while still maintaining the integrity of the process. And as you can imagine, that's one of the more challenging elements of this year. Everything that's been done historically, there was usually a very good reason why it had been done. So looking at that in depth is going to be important as we go through the process. Next, we have some tentative dates for our district priority engagement. So we've started putting together materials based on these dates, and they're all going to be in January. So these are the community engagement portions of the district priority conversations. As you recall, we present to the community the priorities that have been assembled by cabinet for feedback. Committee members vote on those, and we incorporate that into the build of the final budget. We've broken down the engagements into 4 targeted areas. So it's youth engagement on the 12th, general audience engagement on the 13th, community partners engagement on the 20th, which we're actually going to be doing joint with TCAB, but hosting other community partner groups as well. And there's the multilingual presentation on the 27th. And we're going to keep the survey window open for a month to gather feedback from those engagements and at large. Next, we have the enrollment projection process. So this is, officially like the beginning, well, after really the second step in the FY23 process after the priorities is the enrollment projection. So this is going through the numerical projection process. So we have our timeline that we've been working on and towards with regards to enrollment projections. And just, as a reminder, the process isn't all internal. We take some numerical data. We take 3- and 5-year averages in different instances. Every school circumstance is a bit different, so the process isn't the same across the board. For example, we have some schools who've moved in and out of swing space, some schools who've done grade configuration changes or gone through different experiences, changes in leadership. So there are different factors that impact enrollments at the individual school level. And we take those into account in terms of what methodology we use for the numerical projections. And we then take those projections, review them internally with a few different offices within city schools to get feedback from planning, facilities, enrollment choice. A number of different people have given us some feedback and input on the numerical projections. We then share those out to schools, and then the school leaders themselves can give us feedback on their projections. They can say, based on what they know or what they've been experiencing, whether they think the numerical projections are accurate, they need to be increased, decreased. As you can imagine, a lot of times, the requests are for increase. We're very straightforward in that not every recommendation is going to be taken. It has to be quantified. It has to be justified through some means of support. But if it is, we do take that feedback into account in the final projections that we utilize for schools. So typically, over the last few years, we've been pretty spot on with the district-wide projections, but of course, seeing a lot of variance on the school level projections because it just shifts, from school to school. This past year, we were a little further off from normal, which, is not surprising given COVID. So it was a little harder to predict numerically or to follow the previous numerical trends to arrive at our projection. So we're looking at different ways that we factor that in this year in our methodology and how to treat the COVID year and the continuation, of circumstances right now into our projection. So there is, a bit of unknown, but I think we're fairly confident in the new methodology or the updates in the methodology that we're using. Next is Kerwin. So we've continued our Kerwin work, as we've mentioned before a number of times. We've had, as we discussed, the monthly internal Kerwin work group meetings. We've had a couple of them at this point in November and December meeting. And work has been underway in terms of like making sure central office folks are starting to get up to date as to what the expectations are, the areas that we want to focus on for Kerwin, and gathering feedback on the items that folks are concerned with or they want to see addressed in one way or another. We're also engaging other districts, in partnership as we discuss Kerwin and implications of Kerwin moving forward. Like I said, we're going to do a larger scale Kerwin presentation to the board, public board in January, where we're going to go into some more detail on the Kerwin project plan, the elements of the implementation and the implementation development plan, as well as some of the items from the work groups that we're going to share with the board and just things to look forward to for Kerwin, not just for FY23, but over the next few years. And that is it. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'll open the floor to my colleagues. Commissioner Bondina, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Reed? You're muted.
You're on mute.
All right, 1.5 questions. I guess I'm impressed by the level of communication we've achieved over the last couple of years. I guess the other side is the financial side. I guess in terms of the integration and understanding, what's the level of understanding with the community and staff in terms of the spending and use of funds for R3 blueprint? And I guess for Kerwin, I guess when you make a presentation to the board, will there be some talk in terms of the sources and uses of funds? We will use that. So it's a little bit of a 1.5 questions, but I guess it all relates to the financial side.
Yeah, it does. And I'll start with and I didn't mention it here, but one of the things that we're looking at internally, and again, we're piloting a few things centrally that we hope to sort of spread to schools, but we're trying to build up some more financial literacy in central office in different departments. So as we're going through the budget process, there's a lot of the process that we typically, we provide for folks, like we pull up historical data and information. We'll look at their spending and different trends. And, we provide them with a lot of supports. And what we're doing this year is sort of shift that focus a bit to teach folks how to access that information themselves and how to look at that information, how to interpret it, where to go to find it. And, of course, we're going to be there supporting them, and helping them, kind of check it. But we definitely want to build up capacity. And, this is for a number of different reasons. We know, there's a fair bit of turnover in terms of folks who've been entering or leaving the district. We have just transitions because we're going through a new ERP system. We have, transitions because of Kerwin and a number of other things. So it seemed, smart to start building up the capacity for folks who are involved in the processes. And we want to do the same things for schools. Kerwin also is going to offer a lot of opportunity for that. Part of the rub with Kerwin is that we're still figuring out as well, like not just us city schools, but all the various districts as we go through this with the AIB and some of the information that we've been receiving. But our goal is to bring schools up to speed as quickly as we can and make sure that we all, meaning, us in central office, the board, our senior leadership are all aware enough of what is involved in Kerwin that we can also speak to it when folks come to us with questions and concerns. So that is the objective. It's going to be a longer term objective than I think in a normal budget cycle, just because of the depth of Kerwin and the multi-year facets of Kerwin. There are a number of things that, don't get started immediately in FY23. There's some things that we don't have to report on until later down, or we don't have to fully realize the impact of until 4 or 5 years down the road. So we're planning those things out and categorizing those things and trying to build them into the process. Like Chief Doherty's there. Yeah.
Thank you. I will be brief, Madam Chair. I know we have a tight schedule. I would just add to Courtney's comments, Commissioner Reed, that actually I think that because of the size of the federal funds, there's actually more discussion on a case-by-case basis with folks as to whether certain funds that they're using are going to expire or not. So on a normal year, I think there's some understanding, but I think, people can be forgiven at the working level if they're being funded at general fund or grant funds. Sometimes people are not entirely sure. because there's been so much discussion appropriately about the size of the new funds, there's been a spike in very frank discussions with folks about whether, okay, here's what the plan is, and just know this, these funds are falling off a cliff relatively soon. And so it's been good to have the extra money, and it's also been good because everyone's super aware of whether activity X is on general funds, is it on ARP or ESSER funds, or is it on other kind of grant funds. And I think that's been in a way that would have been hard to do without this, massive public knowledge of the size and importance of utilizing the ESSER funds extremely well. So I think you'd be very happy if you were kind of a fly on the wall with dozens and dozens of these conversations and people being aware of what their funding stream is and what the implications of that funding stream are.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I also just wanted to highlight from the budget forum that we had about a month or so ago, how the finance team was able to disaggregate out the different funded sources and what there is to be allotted for and the reporting responsibilities. And so I'm hopeful, Courtney, that's also something that's going to be a part of community engagement with these groups.
I don't think it's set out that succinctly. I think as we talk through the priorities, there may be some discussion as to the different funding types, but we're doing the priorities, at least the priority communications that we're having right now. It's tied a lot more to the R3 work, and it's more funding agnostic. We want folks to sort of like give feedback as to what's important, and then we are subsequently going to identify the best funding source to meet that goal. And then we'll then report back out on that. So it's not like during the actual community engagements, we're going to be saying this will be grant funded or this will be general funded. That's not going to happen until later down the process. But I think based on what you're saying, it might behoove us to, when we get back to the reporting phase, make that point more interactive as well, like in terms of how we go about assessing what funding type should be used.
Yes, and I'm just thinking from the perspective of just education around what the funding is to be used for throughout the system. That is, there's not just an influx of dollars coming in, but there's a responsibility for each funded source to do a particular job or a particular task or to cover a particular expenditure, and what the restrictions are around that as it runs in tandem with the R3 work alongside just general operations of abiding by the new Kerwin law and the other funded sources.
Yeah, I think that's something that we plan to and can probably expand on, but through the budget book and budget presentations, talk more on the etymology of the different funding sources, like what they are, what they can do, what they can be used for. So when folks see them referenced, they know, more of the rules and guidelines surrounding those funding sources, particularly, well, almost specifically the grants, but in this case, Kerwin has a lot of new restrictions as well. There are different ways that certain pockets of money within Kerwin can be used and have to be reported on. So that should be shared as well.
Thank you so much. I don't think we have any more questions. As always, thank you for the work, the team of finance, and anyone that's collaborating alongside your team to offer such meaningful information. Thank you. We can transition to the next presentation, which is the sustainability update.
Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Good morning, everyone. I'm Joanna P. Sounier, and I am going to be reporting about sustainability at city schools in the last fiscal year. And I can't see the chat while I'm presenting, so if you would kindly interrupt me if anything comes up midway.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So just to frame the discussion, we have a sustainability policy, but we are guided in our day-to-day work by the sustainability plan, which is in these 6 issue areas that I'm going to be going through, just some of the highlights of the year. All of the sustainability work really aligns with the 7 board priorities. We can really go through each one of these priorities and find a piece where the sustainability work fits in. And so it's very broad, and the work that I'm reporting on is from multiple departments and individuals, many of whom are also on this call and may have comments to chime in as well. Excuse me. Sustainability also supports our work through the blueprint, through our equity policy, our wellness policy, and our family and community engagement policy. And there is a lot of overlap between all of this work to promote each of the goals in each of those policies. So I also want to take a moment just to speak about what are green schools and sustainable schools. And although we have these 6 categories, we can also think about them in 2 main ways. One is about our actual school buildings and operations, in that we have almost 17 million square feet of buildings. We have huge energy use. We create a lot of trash. We just have a big impact on the environment. And then there is the student engagement and student environmental literacy side. And all of that work fits together and really helps achieve the many, many benefits that can be documented through doing this work, whether it be for student wellness, student academic achievement, staff wellness and achievement, as well as reduced impact on the earth. So to start going through these just with some quick overviews of some of the high points. The first is developing environmentally literate students. We were able last year to provide professional development. This was something that we could do either remotely or in person. This is a picture of an outdoor learning training with teachers at Windsor Hills. So we partnered with the science office and health and PE to do some systemic professional development days, as well as with the Office of Sustainability to do sessions in person. And we continue to focus on training at Graceland and Holabird to ensure that we meet the net zero energy goals at those schools. Another piece of the environmentally literate students is providing standards-based curriculum. You may recall that in past years we've spoken about the curriculum aligned STEM experiences. Unfortunately, most of those had to go remote. And as you can see, this is a picture on the right of the zoo and on the left of hands-on activities at homes that our teachers and partners were still able to do. Great Kids Farm was also able to do a lot virtually and in person. The picture there on the left is of the thousands of activity kits that Great Kids Farm made with a variety of partners and delivered to schools. They were doing FaceTime the Farmer. They pivoted their 2nd grade experience to be a virtual experience. And then our 4th grade partnership with the social studies team continued and had a number of different virtual options as well. We continue to have lots of partners who supported us in a variety of ways. Some of them were really struggling themselves. Others were in more solid position and able to adapt and continue to serve us. So it really varied in each relationship. Moving into healthy school environments, obviously there was a huge emphasis on cleaning last year given COVID, and so we worked hard to ensure that we were using a less toxic yet equally effective and compliant disinfectant for our cleaning at schools. We do continue to have challenges with our Cleaning for Health effort and having schools use the correct products. So that is an ongoing piece, but really the focus, as you can imagine, last year was on the cleaning, as we didn't know yet how the coronavirus was transmitted. We also did a number of projects to improve the learning environments for our kids. So the design and construction team was busy with a number of improvement projects. The facility maintenance and operations team was also very, very busy. So the focus on improved indoor air quality, not only for a COVID response, but also has positive responses for general and overall wellness in our buildings. We have lots of activity in the nutrition education and fresh fruits and vegetable teams. So delivering food during the pandemic was, of course, a hugely important role, and Food and Nutrition Services really adapted. And I know you have, or I believe that you have heard about all of, or many of their activities previously, so I'm not going to detail through all of them, but the pieces with Great Kids Farm was really impressive and really engaged a lot of kids in new ways and different opportunities. So the thousands of pounds of fresh produce and fresh fruit and vegetable programs and different things were really creative ways of having both nutrition education and nutrition directly to our students and families. The next category is reduce and conserve natural resources, and the main news here is that recycling was suspended last year and is partially suspended this year due to driver shortages at the City Department of Public Works, who collects our recycling from all schools. So there really was no recycling last year. Our information technology department did continue to do e-cycling and is continuing to buy computers that are certified as Energy Star. Conserving energy takes lots of different forms across the district. So whether it be Graceland and Holabird, we are, did a good job of getting that building up and running and working on tuning it and are meeting our expectations there. And then, of course, by adding all of the new air scrubbers for COVID response, there is, of course, a increased use of electricity for that. So that's obviously a con of having to do that, but was a requirement that, of course, we needed to do. The next thing is improve school green spaces. We worked with a number of different partners to work on our garden spaces, do training through our Nature Nurture Symposium, which is trying to bring more education both to teachers and to other specialists working with our kids. And we also focused on an outdoor classroom effort. So you may recall that we've had a small program where we give schools like $1,000 to do student-led greening projects. Many teachers still had money from the prior year that they couldn't spend. So we were able to work with our funders with the next set of money and make larger grants to fewer numbers of schools. So we made $10,000 pledges to schools, and some of those outdoor classroom spaces are complete. Many schools really want shade. And shade, it turns out, other than planting a tree today, is actually very difficult and expensive to build shade structures. So we are working through trying to find some additional money and to also work through the building permit process with the City of Baltimore. We did develop a resource of outdoor learning opportunities, both for outdoor meals for COVID safe response, as well as for classrooms, and had teachers who are doing this work already, did some short videos, helped to lead some of those trainings that I spoke about earlier. And we also work to engage our school communities, the next category. We did still have lots of schools did, as requested, to designate someone as a sustainability ambassador. But as you may imagine, this was not the priority of the majority of schools last year. And so very few did a sustainability plan. We did still have a number of teachers participate in our Green Leader Achievement Unit program, fewer than in previous years and fewer than in this year's, and continue to focus on our Green Schools updates of sharing best practices and ideas and shout outs. And the final category is building student leadership. So there were still opportunities through some of our partners and through Great Kids Farm to have paid student internships and increased our partnership with the College and Career Readiness Office. We've done some Green Careers panels and increased our collaboration in finding ways to prepare our students for the green economy. A quick update on the LEED certifications. This is the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. So we continue to have more schools certified as either silver, gold, or in the case of Graceland and Holabird, platinum, and then a number more coming in anticipation of being certified. The challenges are similar to in past years, obviously with COVID-19 front and center, and just being in a remote setting made this work clearly much more difficult, but we're able to really try and find and found some creative ways to engage students and staff. The focus for this year that we are in now, we have lighting upgrades are underway at 15 schools. We are continuing to work with Graceland and Holabird to ensure that those are net zero. We are working on supporting outdoor meals and outdoor learning. We know that COVID is still here and still with us, and when the weather warms up, we really want to get kids out as much as possible. We'd like to get them out in the cooler weather as well, but that's more challenging. So we are working on furniture, tables, portable seating for a number of schools for outdoor lunch, and continuing to focus on how we can strengthen opportunities within the curriculum to have partners and really get kids engaged in this work. And then I am also working on updating the sustainability policy. So that's something that is underway now, meeting with lots of different stakeholders, gathering input. And I encourage anyone listening in this moment or participating that we would love to have feedback on we have a very short survey. We also welcome any digital stories you may have of challenges, positives that you have seen or feel or recommend, or if you want to dig into the documents themselves and actually give us point-by-point comments, we welcome that. And then we'll be doing some additional virtual forums in January. And that is my presentation, and I thank you very much for the opportunity and welcome any questions.
Yes, I think my hand is up. Did you see that? Okay, thank you. I have several questions, but I'll make them quick in the interest of time. And some of the questions I asked, I was concerned with at the beginning, and you sort of answered the questions as you moved toward the end. And what I wanted to know, how many green schools do we have?
We have 30.
Okay.
Right now.
All elementary schools.
They are not. We have a number of high schools.
Okay.
Augusta Fells,
Okay.
City College, Reginald F. Lewis. So we have a number of them. And it's a certification that has to be renewed every 4 years. Okay. And the certifying organization gave a 1-year grace period last year. So we have a lot that are scheduled for renewal this year.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm not sure we're going to maintain that 30 number this year.
Okay. Another quick question. You talk about stipends for the teachers. The stipends that you give, is that during the summer or weekends for work that they're doing? And also, is that K through 12?
Yes, so we were able to get stipend money from MAO, which is the Maryland Association of Environmental and Outdoor Education, and that's the body that certifies schools as green, and it was for training times outside of the school day. So we met out after school hours, and they received a stipend for participating in that training.
2 more quick questions. I'm going to get finished. I didn't see NSF on your list of support organizations. Do we ever go into, I've mentioned this before in some of our presentations here and other places in the system. Why don't we look into a National Science Foundation?
So the science office, to my understanding, does have several grants from NSF, from the National Science Foundation, for other projects. So essentially, we have not applied to them for environmentally related projects, but they do have funding. But I can, I will follow up with Josh Gabriels on that because I don't have the precise numbers and grants on that.
Yeah, I'm always asking about that because we have the perfect environment to get something from NSF at any level, small, medium, or large. And I ask this question all the time, and I'm a little bit concerned that I don't know where we are with that, and I would like to know. And the last question real quick is when you talk about, I forgot what number it was, what slide, you talk about clean schools, and you said, it sounded like you were a little had difficulty in the challenge to make sure the schools are clean, because I've heard issues related to bathrooms issues. Is that a challenge?
So where my work lies is trying to have schools use the correct cleaning products and trying to use less toxic products that are less damaging to the health of the custodial staff and to our students. And we do have some challenges there. I cannot speak to the direct piece of actually cleaning of bathrooms. And so if one of my colleagues wants to jump in on that, I welcome their answer on that.
Okay. I get a lot of emails from parents who are concerned with the condition of bathrooms. And so I was just wondering about that, if that's a big challenge across the board. Well, I'm sure it must be.
Commissioner, this is Blaine Lipsy. I just want to add that under our designing construction project, which we'll give you an update later in the month, probably the first of the year, but we are going to be renovating a considerable amount of bathrooms throughout the district with our health and safety funding that we received, as well as some other funding to increase ventilation in the bathrooms through the ESSER program. But we can provide you the information prior to next meeting, but next meeting we can be on the agenda to update you with that information.
Okay, thank you.
And I think one other thing I just want to add to Blaine's piece around cleanliness and bathroom, that's something that we've been focused on, particularly with the pandemic and some of those different things like that. And so we have, every school should have a checklist of how frequent custodians are cleaning in their particular bathrooms. We have a custodian liaison who have been working with schools around cleanliness with the entire building, but also focusing on bathrooms. And so if families can be directed to communicate with us and identify any bathrooms that they're flagging in terms of concerns, we can have our custodian liaison team go and consult with the schools around cleanliness practices, or and also review some of their processes to ensure that the bathrooms are clean.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Reed?
I just want, thank you for the whole discourse in terms of nutrition education. Is there some correlation between nutrition education and classroom success?
I don't have that at my fingertips, so I don't know. I believe that there is, and which is why we are focusing on this, and I will follow up with Liz Marchetta to respond with some research, because I believe that there is a correlation of good nutrition being a concentration level and focus and attendance at school.
Thank you.
So I have two questions, one of which you touched on it slightly on slide 17 around the shaded spaces. If you could speak to a little around the challenges of being an urban school system and the variability of our buildings and where they're located, and how that does affect what you're able to do realistically from school community to school community.
Yes, that's an excellent point, and there's not a one size fits all for our campuses. So what we are trying to do is ask schools to think creatively. What may look like a low wall around a perimeter, maybe that's a perfect spot to eat lunch at, that has not previously been thought about as a outdoor space. And then other schools may have lots and lots of green space that is in fact so open that it feels sort of a little bit too much. And how do we create like boundaries so that there can be a comfortable space? Because one of the big fears that teachers have is, oh my gosh, my kids are just going to take off. and how do they stay in place, and how do I keep them safe, and how do we have them close to the building so that if there is a need to bring them inside quickly, I am able to do that. So these are all things that we talk about and try and consider when we are figuring out where would be safe, good spaces to have a classroom sit or have an outdoor lunch spot that may, someplace that's maybe a little bit noisier could be fine for outdoor lunch, but maybe is not so good for a classroom space, or a space that initially seems great but is right next to the play yard may not be great. And we've had some schools say, we just don't feel comfortable having our kids outside. We need more fencing, we need more security, and that's something that we are trying to figure out.
Thank you so much. And then my second question would just honestly be around capacity for staff and for logistics. I was able to visit Hollabird Academy, which we have the honor of saying we have a LEED Platinum school, 2 LEED Platinum schools in our portfolio. And it's a beautiful opportunity for students to learn and be in that space for their learning experience. But something that I also understand is that it's very challenging to scale the human capital that's needed to effectively run a robust program of that sort. So could you speak to that a bit? Because I think, just having those schools in the system and seeing what they look like, a lot of times it gets lost around what processes, the amount of staff it takes to roll that out, and the variability, it coupled to your previous point around the variability of buildings and where they're located and the size and the condition all play into those factors.
Agreed. I can speak a little bit about the education side, and I believe either Dr. Washington or Maurice Gaskins, I'm not sure if Cindy is on, would like to speak about the construction side afterward. I welcome that. I think on the education side, it is a big lift, because you can build the most beautiful building and have it be designed to be net zero. And if every, window is open and every teacher has a microwave and a coffee pot and, lights are on and all these things, and our HVAC is running, then we're not going to meet those goals. So it does take a lot of work. I would argue that we need to be doing that work anyway, regardless of whether it's a net zero building or not. Because all of those things contribute to our high energy use, and in a positive sense can contribute into more awareness and well-being of our buildings. So I hope that we can continue to have that be part of our education programming whenever we're doing, new projects or upgrades and helping to build awareness. And that's something that we are trying to work into those regular projects.
Thank you.
And just, I'm going to chime in a little bit, just a few minutes on the facility side. I'm Cindy Smith, Director of Design and Construction. So yes, there is definitely a learning element across the board. In the systems require, there's new systems in these buildings that require training for maintenance staff, training for the users to use. It's definitely a bigger lift than a normal building. I am with Joanna, though, in the idea that not necessarily going for net zero, but the idea of being energy efficient in our building designs, designing towards an energy goal is something that we should be doing because it saves us money in the long run, even if it does require some training. It saves us money because buildings cost a lot of money to operate. And part of that is the energy part of that is energy. So if we can save money in the energy, there is savings there. So it's a balance of how much money we save versus how much money we have to spend. And we have to just really, keep an eye on that balance to make sure that we're always in the positive and not on the negative side.
And there's always a win when we're able to include that into student curriculum so they can learn from their school.
Definitely, yes.
Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
We can prepare for the next presentation of the morning, the 21st Century Schools update. Will that be Ms. Hellman? It's not Ms. Hellman. Good morning. Michael McBride, will you be doing the 21st century update?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, there we are. Can you see the presentation?
I actually don't. I'm not sure if it's just on my side, so if someone else can chime in. I just see a black screen.
Black screen.
I don't see it also. I don't see it either.
Okay, so yeah, it's just a black screen on our side, Mr. McBride.
No problem.
I see it there.
Yes, we're good.
You can see it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, can you see it now?
Yeah, we're good. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Okay,
Yes.
very good. I guess I have an option here. I can see you or you can see me, but I think it's more important that you see the presentation than see me. Can you see me?
No.
Okay, we'll just have to go with that. Again, I'm Michael McBride. I'm the Director of Design, and I'll be presenting the 21st Century Schools Program's fourth quarter update.
Mr. McBride, I don't know if you, okay, there we go. Sorry, we were having tech issues.
Yeah, I certainly was. Okay, I apologize for the technical issues. Today we will touch on the strategic priority alignment. That is how 21st Century touches the board's strategic priorities. We'll speak briefly about the progress and construction and provide construction updates on, thanks Blaine, on years 1 and 2 schools. We'll talk briefly about swing locations and transportation, high school feasibility studies, and finally, community engagement, student internship, local hires, and communications. In terms of how the program touches the or supports the commissioner's strategic plan, strategic priorities, we do that on we meet the obligations of priority number 3 by delivering high quality facilities that support the success of our students and staff. We touch priority number 4 by fully engaging stakeholders to deliver buildings that contribute to academic success. 11 planned year 1 schools have opened, with the exception of the co-located Claremont School, which will open June of 2022 after the original Patterson High School demolition and remaining site work are completed. Continuing with Plan 2 school openings. The Northwood dedication ceremony was held on November 7th. The event was well attended and the building was very well received. The school will officially open January 3rd of 2022. 3 Plan Year 2 schools are under construction. Those include Montebello, Highlandtown, and Cross Country. Montebello, originally scheduled to open September of 2022, is now scheduled to open December 2022, and that's due to HVAC supply chain issues. Construction is progressing on Highlandtown and remains on schedule to open December 2022. Demolition and abatement are underway on the Cross Country project. The existing building is expected to be brought down early January of 2022. The project remains on schedule to open September 2023. The board and the ISC approved the Commodore John Rogers project. Design development is expected to begin in spring of 2022, with construction beginning January of 2023. The project opening date is January or September of 2024. Just a few construction progress photos. The photo on the left is an aerial view of the new Northwood from Lochraven Boulevard. The photo on the upper right is a view of the cafetorium, with a wonderful view onto the green across the street from the school. The photo in the lower right is the media center, which also has a really wonderful view onto the play area and green spaces as well. We're looking at a shot here of, Montebello. The photo on the left is a view of the existing building, and you can see the new addition being framed. This is a view from Karen Drive. The photo on the upper right shows the gymatorium build out. The photo on the lower right shows a typical corridor build out. A bit of an update on the swing space locations and transportation. There are 3 permanent schools located in swing locations at the time. They include Montebello, Highlandtown, and Cross Country. Please note here that Montebello will remain at its swing location through December for reasons I previously mentioned. Due to driver recruitment and retention issues, 19 buses operated by 2 transportation companies are providing yellow bus service at swing locations. To date, there have been no COVID-related service interruptions. A brief update on high school feasibility studies. Feasibility studies are complete for Douglas Briscoe, City College, and Poly Western. The board provided conditional approval of Douglas Briscoe and City College. The program will further explore design efficiencies and cost containment strategies and resubmit a proposal to the board for final approval prior to construction. The request for final approval is expected to occur the fall of 2022. A 5th Poly Western feasibility option for a new building on existing athletic fields is complete and is being vetted by internal and external stakeholders. After consensus is reached, the program will seek board's conditional approval. The request for conditional approval is expected to occur early 2022. City schools and MSA are in ongoing discussions about an MOU agreement for Build to Learn projects, and final consensus, consensus from the ISC on all 3 projects is pending. Just to go over a few brief engagement highlights from June through December of the year. A second feasibility study meeting was held for Poly Western. A series of meetings were held with DDOT and community organizations regarding pedestrian and vehicular traffic concerns around cross country. The team collaborated with ONI and school leadership to rename Mosier to Billie Holiday and Calverton to Katherine Johnson Global Academy. The team also held a final feasibility study meeting for Commodore John Rogers, and finally they convened construction meetings for Northwood. A brief update on the student internship program and local hiring. Since 2016, 23 students have completed the paid summer internship with 21st Century, including 5 students who completed the program this past summer. 21st Century will request 8 slots for its 2022 summer program. As of November 2021, 8,846 candidates have applied for clearance, excuse me, of which 8,458 have cleared. And these are candidates for job opportunities within the 21st Century program. Of the remaining 388 candidates who were cleared, 7 exercised their rights to an appeal, of which 5 received clearance. And finally, communications. The program online publishes a quarterly newsletter to keep the public informed about the program. Here are some examples of articles. There's a wonderful response from the principal of Medfield Elementary, a staff highlight, and recent social media stats. The social media is an invaluable tool to us as we plan community meetings and elicit feedback on our projects. This is a sneak preview of a work in progress on a new 21st Century promotional brochure. The brochure is being designed to inform the public about 21st Century and the unique academic programs offered at 21st Century schools. The publication is expected to be released in print and virtual formats in the winter/spring of 2022. And this is, to conclude, this is a slide of the Northwood Elementary, which is the latest school completed in the 21st Century portfolio. As it says, upcoming ribbon cutting event. Obviously, we submit these presentations prior, so this has already occurred. The next schools to be delivered are Highlandtown and Montebello, both scheduled to open in December of 2022. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. McBride. Commissioner Bondima, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. Great presentation. Thank you very much. Could you bring back slide number 7? We went through it kind of quickly, and I had a question about, I think that was Montebello.
All right.
Okay, so slide 7. Is that Montebello?
Of course, now it's working beautifully after the presentation.
Okay.
There we are.
That was Northwood?
That was Northwood. Okay. This is Montebello.
Okay, which school did you say that you were saying you were building another building across the street from the school? What was going to be across the street from the school? It wasn't on the school campus. I didn't quite get that one.
Not to worry. What I was referring to is that was at Northwood.
Okay, Northwood.
I was pointing out that the students can sit in the cafeteria and they have a wonderful view of the green space across the street.
Oh, it's not you didn't build a building across the street.
No, we didn't.
When you say green space, what's across the street? Is it like a playground? What's across the street that you consider a green space?
It's a space that it's a treed space.
Oh, trees. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, is it a location where they can go over and move around if they want to do environmental projects, something like that?
No, it's just that we have the sight line onto the space. That's all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just didn't understand what that meant. Okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
Commissioner Reed.
I'm fine. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
I too do not have any questions, but every time I get an opportunity to highlight the amazing things that are coming out of the 21st Century program and out of the from the 21st Century team and all of the collaborative people in this process. I am ecstatic. These buildings are amazing. They're beautiful. They're great learning spaces for our students, and they certainly add a much, much well over deserved, what do I want to say? Addition to the portfolio. So thank you so much for the presentation.
That's my pleasure.
We can transition to the next presentation, the Fund for Educational Excellence Transportation presentation.
Thanks so much, Commissioner. We'd love it if my colleague Corey Schoenberg could share her screen, if it's possible.
Roger, she should be able to, but I can also make her, actually, let me make her a presenter, I'm sorry. And I'll make you a presenter as well. So you should be able to now. Is it work? And Mr. McBride, would you mind stop sharing? Thank you.
There we go. So thank you so much. We are really grateful to have some time to present a report that we completed about how students get to and from school. I think most of you know, but really quickly, the Fund for Educational Excellence is Baltimore's only local education fund. We work and partner with the school system in a number of different ways. And for the purposes of this presentation, want to talk about the history we have over the last several years of completing reports on topics and policy topics that the district we know thinks carefully about that have direct effects on students and families. In the past, we have done reports on issues like school choice, college readiness, and career and technical education in Baltimore City Public Schools. And each time we talk to hundreds and hundreds of students and families to understand how they're experiencing those aspects of their child's education or the students themselves' education. And in each of those reports, in some way or another, this issue of transportation came to the forefront. And so when we started thinking about what we wanted our next report to be about, it was really clear that transportation should be where we decided to dig in deep. So that is what we did. We released this report in June, and I will turn it over to my colleagues who are going to take us through this in a lot more detail. I think we've got, I think my team is here. I see them.
They're still muted. So
yeah,
if you got, I don't know if you're aware, you guys are still muted, whoever's turn it is.
All right, I'm gonna kick us off. I'm waiting for my colleague Kwan, but let me keep going. And Kwan, chime in if you are able to. So we had a couple of objectives for this report, and what we wanted to hear from students first and foremost was how city students travel to and from schools, why they travel the way they do, and how that experience affects them. And when we set out to do this, I think we can move to the next slide. This is background you all know, so we weren't going to spend a lot of time on this. The one bullet here that I'd love to just point out to you is these final two, sorry. 18% of the annual ridership on Baltimore City Public Schools, 18% of the ridership of MTA's core service are city school students. And about 29,000 students from city schools rely on MTA to get to school every day. I think we can move to the next slide. You
all hear me? Roger?
Yes, now I can hear you. Go ahead,
Okay,
Corey.
I can jump in and take it from here. We might be having some trouble with the mute function on here, but I'll jump in here. This is how we conducted this study. We did 30-minute interviews with 274 high school students, and this was largely a representative sample from Baltimore City public high schools. We did hear from every high school but one. And we heard from a demographically representative sample and then largely a geographically representative sample too. We did try to concentrate on some areas and set targets for specific communities where there are large numbers of high school students living. And those would be the blue neighborhoods in West Baltimore and the yellow and orange neighborhoods in Northeast Baltimore. We also decided to look specifically at East and South Baltimore because those are more geographically isolated areas that could have trouble getting to some of the schools on transit. These were the themes and findings from all of the interviews that we conducted, and we do go through a pretty comprehensive mixed methods analysis of these using specialized software. So these were the large themes that came out of our interviews. They fell largely into two buckets, safety and reliability. We are going to dive a little more deeply into those two buckets. But if there's anything on this list that we don't get into, please feel free to bring us back to it at the end, and we'd be happy to talk more about those as well. So student safety, I'm going to slow down here. These are a few of the key findings on student safety that came to light in our interviews with students. Students told us a lot about what makes them feel unsafe while traveling on transit. It mostly has to do with travel early in the morning or after dark, navigating car traffic and unsafe driving when crossing streets, and travel in crowded situations with a lot of unfamiliar people. Another thing we heard a lot about was how common it is to see arguments and physical fights break out on public transit, and how uncomfortable and irritated that makes students feel. And then finally, I think this was surprising to us, maybe shouldn't have been, but really disconcerting and disturbing. There were a number of female students who shared their experiences of being sexually harassed, either en route to bus stops or transit hubs, or while on transit itself. And I think that was something we felt like we also needed to highlight. And one last thing I'll say about this, all of these things are the things that students are experiencing from the early hours of the morning until they get into the school building. This is all happening for them before 8 a.m., right? So they are walking into the day carrying so much, having already navigated and processed so much. These are just a couple of the stories that students told us, examples here. One student who's highlighted here feels unsafe walking in her neighborhood past groups of men on the streets and corners. And the other was robbed at gunpoint. That's obviously a more extreme example, but it's not the only student we heard from who had a direct experience with gun violence. I'll also share a little bit about reliability on transit. These are some of the key findings under that larger reliability umbrella. Most students do rely on MTA buses to get to and from school most of the time, and most students find those buses to be unreliable. Some students feel that buses are more reliable than not, particularly the supplemental buses that run on certain routes. If you're not familiar with them, supplemental buses are additional buses that the MTA runs on routes that run close to schools during times when they expect to see a mass of student riders on those routes. They're also called trippers. That might be a term that's more familiar. They are not student only, and they cannot be by federal law. And they can only deviate minimally from the regular routes, which do not account for student needs in the same way they do adult riders. As evidence for that, you can see here in the green where Burke did an analysis estimating that 2/3 of our high school students have to take at least 2 buses to school, where system-wide, the general population, fewer than half have to do that. And then the last slide I will share with you before I try to hand it off to my colleague is about on-time performance. You see a lot of lines here. So what we're looking at here is on-time performance for some select routes that lots of students told us they use to get to and from school. We're looking at 3 time periods: a regular school week in October 2019, so pre-COVID, a regular school week in February 2020, also pre-COVID, and then a week just recently in November 2021. You can see that in the green, on-time performance in October 2019 was not great. And there's some serious improvement that happened over that 3-month stretch between October and February, where the MTA invested in some infrastructure improvements, transit signal priority installation, and dedicated bus lanes that really improved on-time performance on these bus routes. And now here we are in November, and so much of that progress has kind of been scaled back, been rolled back, and we're seeing rates that look a lot more like October 2019. To give you just a picture, for all of these routes that are shown here, the on-time performance in November 2021 for these routes during the school week was 70%. And if you walked out of the house in the morning to go to your job and your car started reliably 7 times out of 10, I think that would be pretty irritating. Pass it to Ruth.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about lost learning time. And not surprisingly, when students shared that transit is unreliable for them, they also shared that it is impacting their academics and their grades. And they cite public transportation as the main reason for being late to school. And even just missing 5 or 10 minutes of their first period is really having a negative impact on their grades. And we did ask about absences, and students were pretty honest about reasons why they're absent, and really mentioned that lateness is more connected to transit for them and the unreliability. And students reported that just the long commutes are taking time away from doing homework, limiting their ability to take jobs or even be involved in other extracurriculars. And just wanted to point this data point at the bottom of this slide here, that city school high school students were collectively tardy to their first period classes 335,000 times during the 18 to 19 school year, with 79% of high school students arriving late for their first period. We can go to the next slide. So again, some student stories to be able to highlight the reliability and lost learning. We spoke to a student, Ayatunde, from Baltimore City Polytechnic Institute, and he mentioned that in the last term before COVID, he was late 23 times during that quarter, and he was just waiting, and oftentimes the bus wouldn't show up. He'd be waiting and it wouldn't come. So definitely having an impact. We see it when we talk to students. Another student, again, talking about how they were late 10 minutes and their grades are showing that. You can go to the next slide. So recommendations. Every time we put out a report, we have recommendations. And we asked students directly after we interviewed them what they would like to see improve, whether it's from the city of Baltimore, city schools, MTA, combination of both. And we had over 500 recommendations from students. We highlighted or showed in our report the ones that came up the most. And I'm going to kind of go through some of those. And then we at the fund came up with our own, kind of built off of students' recommendations. So the first one at the top, you'll see students really want MTA to run more buses more frequently. They also they rely on the transit app for real-time data, and they really want the MTA to work on the app, which in essence is really about the MTA getting more reliable real-time data on where their buses are and when they're coming. And then another student recommendation is around bus operators. So oftentimes when students lose or forget their one card, bus operators are not very lenient with them on getting on the buses, even though, you know, they're in their school uniforms and look like students. So we recommend some leniency around that. And then I'll just highlight a couple of our recommendations. As noted before by Corey, we really think the MTA should take student riders fully into account when developing regular bus service, not just supplemental service. We believe there are multiple opportunities or more opportunities for them to take student riders into account. And then we believe city schools, the city of Baltimore, and the MTA should partner to provide city school students unlimited free access to MTA to get to school, after school programming, or wherever or however they're using transit. There are other cities that are doing this, and we believe it's really important. And I'll go to the next slide. More of our recommendations, buckets and safety, and then communication and accountability. So again, another student recommendation touching on safety. Students said that they want the MTA and City of Baltimore and city schools to add more shelters and just better lighting at bus stops would really make them feel more comfortable during when it's dark out or in the early mornings. And then I'll touch on some of these last ones here. We believe that the MTA should have seats on their MTA Citizens Advisory Committee. We also are actually in talks with them about creating a student advisory council, which they seem to have committed to, and we're really excited to have students be represented and have their voice shared when making decisions. And then we would like there to be more awareness among school-based staff and central office staff on what students are going through when they're getting to school. You know, Corey mentioned all the things they're going through before 8 a.m. and when they're showing up. And so we would really like there to be more awareness and maybe some training or PD around that as well. I know that that's a lot, so I want to take a minute if anyone has questions on any of what we presented.
I know Commissioner, I was on the phone with Commissioner Roberts and she received a call, so she might not be available. So Commissioner Reed, do you want to temporarily chair?
God bless all of you if I'm going to chair. Okay. Hey, Roger, how are you? Any questions, Commissioner Bondino?
Well, no, I think it was pretty thorough. And some of the questions that I would, in the beginning that I had, you know, and actually answers were shared to some of the questions that I had. I'm always concerned about transportation and cleanliness on those buses. I have a great concern with making sure the buses are clean. And I talked about this early on last year about when we went back to schools. I was really concerned with that. And it was something that I don't think that they can really do. Now, my solution would be for the students to carry their own wipes, where when they get on the bus, they can wipe in the area that they're in. And I don't know if, you know, I'm not sure if students are going to do that. But that was my great concern. But other than that, you really did cover some of the concerns that I had, and you did it well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just have two. I guess one, or three really. I guess, did someone say 79% of the ninth graders are late for school? At least at some point? Is that the number, 79%?
That was 79% of all high school students in the 2018-2019 school year were late at least once to school.
Okay. Okay. And I guess two questions. I guess one, it boiled around to the idea of after-school activities.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any recommendation in terms of how we can have some kind of mitigation or some assistance where students can participate in sports or glee club or whatever after school? Because This is the longest, shortest day of the year, so it's going to get better. But I guess the question is, when it's dark outside, it's dangerous outside. So I guess my first question is, what can we do in terms of making it easier for them to participate in the evening? And my other question is about the whole idea of free bus service. Have the powers that be, City Hall, the state, looked at the idea of Baltimore City Public School students having free bus MTA transportation without having to show all these multiple passes and proofs? So they're my two questions.
I'm happy to take the first. In terms of the evening and safety, a couple of things are swirling, and we are working with some advocacy groups, but safety is a big concern. Right now, we are actually talking with a group of students and advocates at City College about what safety and how to improve it could look like. We really don't want, and students don't want more police presence. But they really would like some community support around safety. So we are looking into some more like what other cities are doing and how they're using their resources and community partners to kind of show up for students. And there's a safe passage program in DC that we're kind of looking into as well. But you're right, safety is a big one, and as well as a sexual harassment campaign, really looking to riders and operators to be able to train and kind of figure out how to mediate when things come up. And also just the unlimited bus passes would be really helpful because students can only use their bus passes between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. So oftentimes if they have to stay later than that, they may not be able to.
And one quick thing on the bus pass, I think I'm right, and Corey or Ruth, correct me if I'm wrong. It's not just the hours that they can use it. They can only use it 2 trips a day. So if they need to go to work or something, or if they need to go to another after school activity, their pass will get them from home to school or school to work, or home to school and school to another activity, but it won't get them from that activity back home. And this is where all of this feedback, the reliability of service, the lighting by the bus stops, all of these things matter. For the kids. Dr. Washington, I see you're on, so I wondered if you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to chime in around the unlimited service. We are in communication with MTA around unlimited services for our students for during the week and also the weekend, because many times students are also traveling on the weekends to do academic related things too. And I think that we really haven't moved past if I am a student, I appear to be a student, I should be able to get on the bus, right? MTA is still requiring some level of identification. So even though if a student does not have their pass, MTA is saying that they will allow students to get on the bus, but we definitely understand that that's not the case when we start talking to students on the ground level of what their experiences are. So we are still having further conversations with MTA about if a student can at least have their student ID, some kind of way to demonstrate that they're a student, then they should be allowed to get on the bus without their pass, because they're students, they're going to definitely lose passes. So those were just the 2 additional things I just wanted to add, that we are in conversation with them about some additional things that they can do in order to support students.
I want to add one more thing. Commissioner, were you finished with your question?
No, please go ahead, Commissioner.
This is an old problem. It goes all the way back for years and years, and I don't know if we'll ever be able to solve it. I have a great concern over the activities that our students have after school in the winter. Today will be the longest day of the year. Then it will start moving to shortening the days as we move back towards spring. But I see at night, I see kids coming from school 5 and 6 o'clock in the evening, and it's so dark. And we all know that if it was our kids, we probably would never let it happen. But I have to say this. I have 2 stepsons that went to Poly, and they would come up going up to Cold Spring, Newtown in the wooded area, and we forbid them to go through the wooded area. And I still see kids traveling, and there's no telephones, no anything in that area traveling up the hill. And several years ago, it was a body found up in the woods. But we have to think of lighting and really put a lot of emphasis and force the city or whatever we have to do to have more lighting. We cannot let something happen and say we wish we had done it. But this is a serious problem around this time of year, to see our kids coming from activities, athletic activities, and have to walk home. Maybe we could arrange for the schools to end their programs earlier, at least a start. But we need to resolve this. And I want this on record to say that we need to figure out what to do. And I know it's a big problem. Maybe we need to form a committee. I don't know. But we need to think of something, because it is very, very dangerous out there. Very. So, but thank you anyway for listening. But I hope that we think of something that we could, I wouldn't mind serving on the committee, really. So.
I just wanted to add, first of all, my apologies for having to step away, but I wanted to add to the points that everyone made and to thank the fund and your whole team that for doing the report. I'll say, just from the perspective of being a Baltimore City Public School graduate and being a part of the citywide district and living in Northeast Baltimore and commuting to school on the West Side, I won't say how long ago that was, but I was a part of that population of students that did that in rain, sleet, snow, all of the climate, all of, delayed day and everything, and how much of a lift that was for me as a student and for my family. And so I am very excited that we're having the conversation around it, because this is not something that's exclusive to Baltimore City Public Schools, but this is every major urban city school system plight and discussion. This is a real challenge and a real barrier for families in terms of thinking about appropriate school communities. Yes, having a choice district, it has its assets, but it also comes with its barriers with transportation challenges, especially in the middle of a global pandemic. And so this conversation is very timely. And I really just appreciate you lifting this and giving students real, authentic, transparent voice around their experiences with public transportation. And as always, the board is always an advocate in lifting that voice to really get to a meaningful solution around what we realistically can move to, being how we can be more efficient in this process of limiting transportation as a barrier to getting our students into our buildings. Because what good is it to erect these beautiful 21st century LEED buildings, these updating the programs, if our students are consistently having barriers to just getting to the building? And so again, thank you so much for the presentation.
Great. Thank you for having us. Much appreciated.
Mr. Gant, is there anyone here for public comment?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman, we welcome you for procurement.
Good morning, almost good afternoon to the board, to the commissioners. I hope everyone is having a great day today. We have 6 items today for consideration by the board. The first is sustainable and non-sustainable cafeteria products. It involves a competitive solicitation, or an increase to a competitive solicitation involving 7 vendors named, and requesting an increase of $1 million to the existing contract, which would bring the contract's new total to $2,900,000, and for a period of July 25th, 2018 to July 24th, 2023.
Commissioner Bondima, Commissioner Reed, any questions around this procurement?
Yes, I have one. I guess it's called grab and go. So I guess that maybe you can explain that to me. The other thing is I think ESSER funding ends in June of 22. So is some of this ESSER funding and some of this going to be out of the regular budget? How's that going to work?
Okay, so let me address grab and go. Grab and go compared to individuals being able to come in and sit down and have a meal dealing with one set of food container, like flatware and a cart, a tray, whereas grab and go deals with a container that will allow the student to pick up their food in that container and move forward without sitting in place to eat. Okay, as I understand the application of the ESSA funds, ESSA funding will be used to cover the cost to the extent that those funds are available. Beyond that, I would have to seek further information if you have a concern.
Someone else has their hand raised. I can't.
Yes. Hi, Commissioner Reed. I just wanted to speak on behalf of Food and Nutrition Services. So, you know, with the real decentralization of where students are eating from the cafeteria to the classroom, we've just had to increase the number of products to enable kids to transport. So instead of having that round, flat cafeteria tray, we have a clamshell container. We're also doing more breakfast grab and go that students get in it's a red and white paper boat that they then take to the classroom. And this is really just in an effort to reduce crowding in the cafeteria, both at breakfast and lunch. Our hope is that, the pandemic will subside and reduce the need over the long term to do meal service in this fashion. But right now, this is really just a health and safety step that we have taken, working with schools just to, reduce crowds of students in the cafeteria.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next item is section 15.01, Chilmaw Corporation, elevator replacement and fire alarm upgrades at warehouse 15, number 760. That contract that will be resulting to Chilmaw is a result of a competitive solicitation. The total amount of the contract award is $781,696.
Commissioner Reed, any questions?
None here.
Okay, we can move forward.
Okay. The next item for consideration is section 15.02, Design Collective Inc. It's an architectural and engineering service for the addition and renovation of Olmsted Gardens pre-K to 8 school, number 243. That award is being recommended as a result of a competitive solicitation. The total amount of the contract award is $2,470,920 for design and architectural engineering services.
Mr. Bondi, Reed, any questions?
No, thank you.
Here.
No.
Okay, we can move forward, Mr. Coleman.
Okay. The next item for consideration is 15.03, Blue Triton Brands, Inc., which is results from a competitive contract of a total of $950,000. The contract term is from February 1st, 2022 through January 31st, 2027, with 3 one-year renewal options.
Do a little shared privilege here. I have several questions. So am I reading correctly? Was this awardee the only respondent to this RFP?
That is correct.
And that was amongst how many people were contacted or solicited?
I received that information. I believe that information was 70. We solicited over 70 vendors through our portal, which is the email and marketplace for advertising.
My second question then would be, what company are our other LEAs using?
Okay, so checking across the state, Prince George's Public Schools has a state contract through the Department of General Services with Blue Triton also. It is the magnitude of the corporation itself and the narrow window or niche area that they're participating in that allows them or any company similarly situated to dominate that area.
Got it. And my last question back to my colleagues would be around, were there any intentional efforts to reach out to any local companies? Was there anyone locally that we kind of tapped that could accommodate the volume of water that our district consumes?
My research indicated that there were none.
Thank you. I'd like to, I saw you pop on, Chief Builder. Was there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I popped on, but then Mr. Coleman had all the answers at his fingertips as well. So I certainly agree with all the comments that Mr. Coleman made. And also an additional type of side research that we did indicated, consistent with what Mr. Coleman said, indicated that one, there were questions as to whether any other provider could have handled the volume that we use. But even if they could have, we often price check when we get RFPs to see whether something that at the end of an RFP, an additional check is to find out whether they're kind of at market levels for costs or higher, especially when you only have one responder. You're concerned that a one responder, not that they know that they're the only responder, but you want to check to make sure that if they're the only game in town, you're not getting killed on the prices. So we did a side research and actually found out the opposite, which is a smaller provider who might be able to meet our volume was actually multiples more expensive than the successful bidder. So that's kind of a confirming point that the bidder, in fact, that we determined to be responsive lowest bidder was also lower than other price checks we did in the area, quite considerably, in fact.
Thank you so much, Chief. I open the floor to Commissioner Reed and Commissioner Bondima. Any questions?
No, I'm good. I got knocked out and I had to come back in. So I'm here. No, I don't have any questions.
My questions is in terms of education. There was a Nestle that came to the board about a month ago. And Nestle basically, I think it was basically through, I guess we had a private equity purchase where Nestle became Triton. One, is this the same Nestle that caused the political conversations at the board? And are there some background social political implications of this relationship that we need to know about?
From my research, and my research consisted of consulting the state state records, state assessment and taxation records, as well as researching across platform of Google to see how the absorption or dissolution of Nestle came about. From the beginning, Blue Triton was a participant in their chain of command. However, Blue Triton assumed Nestle's whole operation to the dissolution of Nestle as a corporate entity. My concern, I have the same concern as you that, hey, we've changed clothes, but we still got the same demon. I could find no indication of any similar or like practices at this time. So I am left to assume that because of my understanding of interlocking corporations and operations, that there is a distinct new leadership in Blue Triton that is moving their operation forward until further information is gleaned.
Chief Builder.
Yeah, just on the original question, certainly, Commissioner Reed, we did check what you summarized quite quickly. One rock was the name of the VC firm that came in and bought not just Ready Refresh, which is the brand that we came to know Nestle Water through, and that's now part of Blue Triton, but they also bought up all the ones you could think of: Deer Park, Arrowhead, Ozark, other ones, and they have not made any statements indicating that they're a break from the past. For example, they didn't say at any level, either with details or not, that they represented a departure from the past. So yes, they have a new like federal filing number, and they have a new post office box in Delaware, but they were not making statements about breaks from the past. That said, we combed over everything that they do have. They have this new entity, Blue Triton, has explicit statements of commitment towards the environment, towards responsible packaging, responsible water sourcing, and responsible operations, because we were, based on the discussion, we were extremely aware of that. So we're kind of monitoring them as closely as we can, with kind of the statements of their commitments up front. So yes, they're new commitments, but that they're new in the sense that Blue Triton didn't exist before. So we're hoping that we're hoping that we're going to hold their feet to the fire about those statements that they put out themselves. But I guess that's the response.
So I think Nestle company is a Dutch company. I'm not sure, but I think
they're Swiss, sir.
Swiss. Okay, so Nestle, the parent, is a Swiss company, but there's no relationship between Nestle U.S. Canada and Nestle Switzerland.
I think there used to be, but now that Blue Triton has come in and taken the North American water business away from Nestle, they are separate corporate entities. But the part we didn't want to airbrush was in their setup documents and in their kind of articles of confederation kind of thing. They didn't make any statements about divorcing themselves from any of the past practices. They just left it silent in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
And Chief Elder, really quickly, could you speak to, because essentially they have a very large share of the market, and the way I understand it is that they're buying some of the other smaller companies.
They definitely have a stranglehold on the 5-gallon jug delivery and dispensary market. That's why one of your questions put your finger right on it. Baltimore County, Howard County, Anne Arundel County, Cecil County, Prince George's County, faced with the same requirements we have, which is lots of schools and lots of kids, and needing delivery and those dispensers. Essentially, nobody can compete with them. And yes, our imperfect review of the market is that they're consolidating lots of providers of lots of different brands under this one label of Blue Triton. So if someone gets Arrowhead and they think, oh, I don't have Nestle, I have Arrowhead, they're all Blue Triton at this point.
They're all under the same umbrella.
Yeah,
they are.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much, Chief Eldery and Mr. Coleman. Has everyone's questions been answered?
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much. I think we have one more.
Yes, our next item is 15.04, all state contracting, roof replacement at Barclay Pre-K to grade 8 school number 54. This contract will result in a contract amount of $1,763,051 even. The contractor price includes a 10% contingency amount, but that is included in its total contract amount.
Commissioner Bond, any questions?
I'm good. Okay. I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Coleman, we can move forward.
Okay. Our last item on today is Item 18.01, Shaw Rosenthal LLP. It's a contract amendment for legal services. The initial contract began October 1st, 2020, and the total amount of the contract was $48,000. On August 24th, 2021, the board approved an increase in amount to the total contract to $150,000 and an extension to the contract through the period of June 30th, 2022. This present contract amendment proposes to increase the contract amount from $150,000 to $230,000, which is an increase of $80,000 to the present contract.
Commissioner Bowden, any questions?
I don't.
Okay, I think that concludes our procurements, Mr. Coleman. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and everyone have a great holiday.
You too. And that also concludes our meeting. I'm going to try to speak really, really quickly so we can still end at 12:15. Everyone have a great holiday season. Happy New Year. And we will see you again in January. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. It's the same to
Thank you,
everyone.
ma'am.
Happy holiday.
Happy holidays.